Well, hello everybody. We're going to head and looking at 2.1 today, which is talking about classifying numbers and deciding if numbers are larger or smaller than other numbers. First of all, let's take a look at this Venn diagram. We have real numbers. So everything we talk about today are going to be considered real numbers. Natural numbers are numbers you count by, 1, 2, 3, and so on. Whole numbers include all the natural numbers plus the number 0. Integers, positive and negative numbers are all considered integers when they're whole numbers and they're positive or negative, they will be referred to as integers. Rational numbers, any fraction that has a repeating decimal or an ending decimal will be considered a rational number. So this is 454545, so that's rational. 2/3 will be 0.666666, and it keeps going on, and the 6 repeats, so it's rational. 3.4 will stop at 3.4, so it's rational. So basically, if you have a decimal that stops or repeats, it's rational. Over here are your irrational numbers. Pi is an example because it's 3.14, but it continues on with several numbers after that. Root 2 will also be irrational. Root 3, root 10 are all irrational. If you place them onto a scientific calculator, you will get a number that goes on past the screen's allowance. So it will continue, for example, like this, 1.2434871, and it continues on forever. That is irrational for it to continue on forever. So that's a way to remember irrational. Let's take a look at the next slide. Here's another Venn diagram helping you know the difference. Natural numbers, counting. Whole numbers, the natural numbers plus the number 0. Integers, positives and negatives. And rational numbers are numbers that either end with a decimal, that stops, or repeats. Irrational numbers are always going to have an unending decimal when you actually work them out. Okay, so let's take a look at a question for you to try out. If we have the number 5 and we want to decide which is the best category for it, our 5 can be placed into natural numbers because we could say the number 5 when we count. We could also write a 5 for whole numbers, a 5 for integers, rational numbers, and real numbers. Let's take a look at the 0.6 here. 0.6, it ends, so it would be considered a natural number? No, we don't count and say 0.6. Whole number? No. Integer? No, it's not a whole number, positive or negative. It belongs in the rational number section. Is it also considered a real number? Yes. So 0.6 could also be considered a real number. Let's take a look at our negative 2/3. Negative 2/3, you wouldn't count by it. It's not a whole number. It's not an integer because it's not a whole number. But it is rational, so we'll place it under rational. Negative 24. It's not natural to count negative 24. It's not a whole number, but it is an integer, so we will place it in integer. Could it also be considered a rational number? Sure, we could put negative 24 under there. It could also be considered a real number. Let's take a look at the next one that we have to discuss, 3.6. It would also be a rational number because it's a decimal that ends. The number 1, do you count with it? Sure. So there's 1. It would be considered a whole number, an integer, a rational, and a real number. How about the number 0? 0, you don't naturally count 0. So it goes to the whole number. It'll be a whole number, integer, rational, real number. Notice this is kind of, the Venn diagram represents how things are laid out for their categories. So natural numbers will always be whole numbers. They'll also be called integers. They'll also be called rational numbers. So let's take a look at the next slide. you guys decide. Please try out number 1 and number 2. So what you'll do, I'll show you first, write number 3 down, and you have to decide if it's a whole number. If it is, we write whole. I'm sorry, my pen is not quite working right. Let's try this again. Whole. Very wobbly. I usually write much better than that. Is it an integer? Sure. So we can write integer. Okay, now it's getting a little bit better writing. And is it a rational number? Sure. We can write it with just 3 and it stops, so it's rational. All right, let's try. You guys go ahead and finish it up by trying negative 1.2 and negative 2, and then try a 0. And then do number 2. Go ahead and stop your video for a moment and try those out. And when you come back, we'll go ahead and discuss what the answer should be. Okay, number 1, I already gave you the 3. Number 1, the negative 1.2. Okay, is it a whole number? No. Is it an integer? Absolutely not. So we write no. And is it rational? Is it a decimal that stops and does not go on forever? Yes. Okay, let's try negative 2. Negative 2. Is it a whole number? No. Is it an integer? Yes, because it has a negative. Is it rational? Yes. Let's try 0. Is it a whole number? Yes. It's not natural, but it's whole. Integer? Yes. Rational? Yes. It hits yes for all 3 of those. Now, those were all for number 1. Let's look at number 2. We have 4.5. Is 4.5 a whole number? No. Is it an integer? Yes. Oops, I'm sorry. No. And rational? Yes, because it is a decimal that stops. Negative 3/4. Whole number? No. Integer? No. And rational number? Yes, because it can be changed to 0.75. It's a decimal that stops. And let's try negative 2.1. Is it a whole number? No. It's not a whole number. Integer? No. Even though it has a negative, it's not considered an integer unless it has like negative 2 or negative 3 or negative 4. This one has a decimal. If it has a decimal, it becomes a rational number? Sure. Because it stops at 0.1 and that would be rational. Finally, we have 0.5, and you guys should have said, is it a whole number? No. Integer? No. Rational? Yes, because it stops. All right. Positive and negative numbers, the farther to the left the number will be, the smaller it is, or the least value. So which number is greater, negative 3 or negative 4? Here's negative 3, here's negative 4. Negative 4 is definitely smaller because it's farther to the left on the number line. Which number is greater, 3 or 4? 4 is bigger because it's farther to the right. 4. Which number is greater? Which number is greater? There we go. 2 questions for you to try out. Pause your video. Try these, please. Welcome back. Let's take a look. Which number is greater, 2 or 5, or negative 5? 2 is farther to the right on the number line, so it is the greater number. Which number is greater, negative 1 or negative 6? Negative 1 is farthest to the right on the number line, so negative 1 is the greater number. All right, I believe that's it for this video, and we have one more video after this, so I'll see you in a few minutes.